This is a story about the ultimate betrayal and a revenge plot you won't see coming. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because this is going to be a wild ride. My dear ones, your feedback means so much to me. Please let me know where you're watching from and whether you enjoyed this story. It's truly, truly important to me. Thank you so much. And now let's begin the story of our heroine, whose life was changed forever by one unexpected twist of fate. The shelter smells of bleach and despair, a far cry from the scent of lemon polish and the roses my late husband David so carefully tended in the garden of our home, my home. Or at least it was my home until last week, when my stepson Marcus threw me out of it with nothing but a single hastily packed suitcase and the clothes on my back. He thinks I'm a weak, grieving old woman who will just fade away in this place, another sad story whispered in the quiet corridors. He has no idea about the promise I made to his dying father, and if he knew about the one hidden clause in the will that his greedy, second-rate lawyer missed, he wouldn't be sleeping so soundly in my bed tonight. My comeback is coming, and it will be glorious. My name is Thea. For 30 years, I was married to the kindest man I've ever known, David Sr. When I married him, his son Marcus was just a troubled 10-year-old whose own mother had run off and left them both behind. I didn't try to replace her. I simply tried to be a source of stability, of love, of kindness in his life. I raised him as my own. But there was always a distance, a quiet resentment in him that I could never quite bridge. He saw me not as a mother, but as the woman who had taken his mother's place. When David Sr. got sick with cancer, I nursed him for 2 long, painful years. On his deathbed, he made me promise something. Thea, he'd whispered, his hand frail in mine, the house, it's yours. It's all in your name. But Marcus, he's weak. He has a good heart, but he's easily led. Promise me you'll always give him a home here. Don't let him end up on the street. I promised. It was the last promise I ever made my husband. A promise I intended to keep. After the funeral, Marcus was a different person. His quiet resentment blossomed into an open, arrogant entitlement. He and his flashy, hard-eyed girlfriend, Tiffany, moved into the guest room and began to treat the house as their own personal resort. They were loud, messy, disrespectful. They treated me like a live-in maid, a quaint old relic who was in their way. I endured it for David's sake, for my promise. The breaking point came last Tuesday. It was over something so small, so petty, it was almost laughable. I'd asked Marcus to please clean up the pile of dirty dishes he and Tiffany had left in the sink. I'll get to it, he'd sneered, not looking up from his phone. I'd appreciate it if you'd get to it now, Marcus, I said, my voice firm but polite. This is still my house, and I expect a certain level of cleanliness. He stood up then, a slow, deliberate movement. He walked over to me, a cruel smirk on his face that was all Tiffany's influence. Your house? He said, his voice a low, mocking drawl. You seem confused, Thea. You're just living here on my good graces, my father's house, which makes it my house. Your father left this house to me, I said, my voice trembling with a sudden, cold fury. It is legally and morally mine. Paperwork can be changed, he said with a shrug. And morals? Honey, morals are for people who can't afford lawyers. He pointed to the door. I'm tired of you, old woman, tired of your sad face, your rules, your very presence. I want you out now. You can't be serious, I gasped. Oh, I'm deadly serious, he said, his eyes as cold as a snake's. I'll be generous. I'll give you until the end of the day to pack a bag. If you're not gone by tonight, I'll have you thrown out as a trespasser. He was an animal, cornered by his own greed and inadequacy, and he was lashing out. He was breaking the last promise I had made to his father, and in doing so, he was releasing me from my own. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, at this boy I had raised, this man who was now a stranger, and I felt something inside me shift. A cold, hard resolve clicked into place. Fine, I said quietly. I went to my room, packed a single suitcase with my most important documents, a few changes of clothes, and a picture of me and his father on our wedding day. And I walked out. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to leave. The church shelter was my only option. So now I am here, in this clean but soulless room, and Marcus and Tiffany are in my house, sleeping in my bed, drinking my husband's good whiskey and celebrating their victory. They think they've won. They think they've gotten rid of the old woman. They are celebrating on the very ground where their own doom is being plotted. Because they don't know about the clause in the will, the one my clever husband and his even more clever lawyer put in, the clause that states that if I am ever, for any reason, unable or unwilling to reside in the house, the property is not to be inherited by his son, but is to be immediately seized and sold, with the entire proceeds donated to a charity for homeless women. They didn't just kick me out of my home, they forfeited their own, and my lawyer, Mr. Hayes, has already been informed. The eviction notice, I'm told, will be served on Monday morning, and I will be there to watch. The weekend I spent at the women's shelter was a masterclass in controlled fury. I was not a victim cowering in a corner. I was a general waiting for sunrise on the morning of a great battle. I ate the simple food, I slept on the narrow cot, and I listened to the heartbreaking stories of the other women there. But all the while, my mind was a coiled spring, ticking down the hours until Monday morning at 9 a.m. That was the time my lawyer, Mr. Hayes, had scheduled with the sheriff's department to serve the eviction notice. My notice. On my own house. On Monday morning, I did not look like a homeless woman. I wore my best church suit, a string of my late husband's pearls, and a hat that tilted at a defiant angle. I met Mr. Hayes at a coffee shop near my old neighborhood. He handed me a folder with the court order and a copy of David Sr.'s will, the key clause highlighted in yellow. "Are you ready for this, Thea?" he asked, his eyes full of a quiet, professional concern. "I've been ready for this my whole life, Franklin," I said, my voice steady. "I just didn't know it until last week." We drove to my house in separate cars. 2 sheriff's deputies were already there, waiting discreetly down the street, just as Mr. Hayes had arranged. I parked across the street, my heart a cold, steady drum in my chest. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about consequence. It was about a promise. We walked up the path to my front door. The roses my husband and I had planted were in full, glorious bloom. I could hear music blasting from inside, some loud, obnoxious rap song that made my teeth ache. Mr. Hayes rang the doorbell. It took them a long time to answer. Finally, the door swung open, and there stood Marcus, shirtless, a half-empty beer bottle in his hand. He blinked at us, his eyes bleary from a late night. "What the hell do you want?" he grumbled. Then he saw me, standing just behind Mr. Hayes. A slow, cruel smirk spread across his face. "Oh, look what the cat dragged in. Come crawling back already, old woman? Did you forget something?" "Yes, as a matter of fact," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "I forgot my house." Before he could respond, Mr. Hayes stepped forward. "Marcus Dubois?" he asked, his voice a sharp legal instrument. "Yeah, who's asking?" "My name is Franklin Hayes. I represent Thea Dubois, the legal and sole owner of this property. You are being served with a court-ordered eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." He handed the thick envelope to Marcus. Marcus just stared at it, then at Mr. Hayes, then at me, and then he burst out laughing. A loud, braying, arrogant laugh. "Eviction notice? Are you insane? This is my house, my father's house. This old woman," he gestured at me with the beer bottle, "has no claim here. She's a guest who overstayed her welcome." From behind him, Tiffany appeared, wrapped in one of my silk robes, her face a mask of smug curiosity. "What's going on, baby?" "The old woman brought a lawyer," Marcus snickered. "She thinks she's going to evict us." "Perhaps you should read the documents before you celebrate," Mr. Hayes said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Specifically, Section 4, Clause B of your father's last will and testament, which I have taken the liberty of highlighting for you." Marcus's smirk faltered. He ripped open the envelope, his eyes scanning the page. I watched his face as he read the clause, the one his brilliant, forward-thinking husband had insisted upon. The clause that stated that in the event that I, his wife Thea, was ever unwilling or unable to reside in the property for any reason, including but not limited to coercion or removal, the house was not to pass to his son, but was to be immediately transferred to the control of the estate's executor, Mr. Hayes, to be sold, with 100% of the proceeds donated to the New Orleans Foundation for Abused and Displaced Women. My husband had known his son. He had known his weakness, his greed, and he had built this final, beautiful legal trap to protect me, even from beyond the grave. I watched the color drain from Marcus's face. I watched his hand tremble, the beer bottle slipping from his suddenly nerveless fingers and crashing to the porch steps. I watched his eyes, wide with horror, dart from the paper to me. He finally understood. He hadn't just kicked me out. He had kicked himself out. His inheritance, his grand prize, the very thing he had betrayed his father's dying wish for, had just vanished into thin air because of his own stupid, greedy actions. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, this is a trick. It's a forgery." "I assure you it is very real," Mr. Hayes said, gesturing to the street, "as are the 2 sheriff's deputies who are here to ensure you comply with the court order. You have 24 hours. After that, anything left in this house will be considered a donation along with the house itself. I'd suggest you start packing." Tiffany shrieked, a sound like a cat being strangled. "You can't do this. This is our house." I looked at her, at the woman who had helped poison my son's heart against me, and I smiled, a real, genuine, and absolutely merciless smile. "No, dear," I said, "it was never your house. It was mine, and now it belongs to women just like me, women who have been thrown out, abused, and left with nothing, thanks to you and to him." I looked at my stepson one last time, at his shattered, disbelieving face, and I felt nothing but the cold, clean satisfaction of a promise kept. "You're on the street now, Marcus," I said softly, "just like you wanted for me. I hope you enjoy the view." Then I turned, walked down the path, got in my car, and drove away, leaving them to the ruins of the life they had tried to steal. I didn't watch them pack. I didn't linger to savor their humiliation. My victory was not in their suffering, but in the clean, decisive execution of justice. I drove away from my old life with the image of my stepson's shattered face burned into my memory, and I did not look back. I returned to the women's shelter, not as a victim anymore, but as a woman who had reclaimed her own power. The narrow cot in the quiet room didn't feel like a symbol of my homelessness. It felt like a command center, the place from which I had won my war. The news of what happened to Marcus and Tiffany trickled back to me through Mr. Hayes. Their relationship, forged in mutual greed, shattered within hours of them being on the street. Tiffany, seeing that her sugar daddy was now a broke, homeless man with no prospects, vanished from his life as quickly as she had entered it. She was a parasite, and she had moved on in search of a new host. Marcus, my stepson, was left completely alone. He tried to call me, of course. He left a string of desperate, then angry, then pleading voicemails. I listened to none of them. I changed my number. His fate was his own to bear. He had made his bed of cruelty and entitlement, and now he had to lie in it. The house, my beautiful home, was sold a month later. As per the will my dear David had so cleverly constructed, the entire substantial sum from the sale was transferred directly to the New Orleans Foundation for Abused and Displaced Women, the very organization that ran the shelter where I was staying. The irony was so profound, so perfect, it was almost biblical. In trying to make me homeless, my stepson had inadvertently become the single largest benefactor to the city's homeless women. With my own separate savings, the ones I had kept hidden from Marcus, I was now free. I could have rented a nice apartment, retired into a quiet life of peace. But something inside me had changed. The weeks I had spent in that shelter, listening to the stories of the other women, had opened my eyes. I saw women who had been cast out by abusive husbands, young mothers who had fled with their children with nothing but the clothes on their backs, older women like me who had been betrayed by their own families. Their stories were all different, but their pain was the same, and I realized my journey wasn't over. My revenge on Marcus was complete, but my new purpose? It was just beginning. I met with the director of the foundation, a formidable, compassionate woman named Dr. Alana Washington. I didn't tell her the full story, but I told her enough. I told her I was a woman who had recently found herself without a home due to a family betrayal, and that I wanted to help. I told her about the donation that had come from my late husband's estate, and then I made her a proposition. You need a new facility, I said. A bigger, better place. A place that feels like a sanctuary, not just a shelter. A place that offers not just a bed, but legal aid, job training, counseling. A place to help women rebuild their lives. We dream of such a place, Thea, she said with a sigh. But the funding for something like that is astronomical. I know, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, and I believe my late husband, through my stepson's foolishness, has just provided the seed money. We spent the next 6 months working together. My years of managing a household, of budgeting, of organizing, all came into play. But now I was managing something bigger. I helped Dr. Washington find a beautiful, old, slightly dilapidated building in a good neighborhood. We used the foundation's new funds to buy it and to hire architects and contractors. We designed a space that was not just functional, but beautiful, filled with light and hope. We called it Thea's house, a home for women who had lost theirs. The day it opened was one of the proudest of my life. I stood in the new, sun-filled common room, surrounded by women whose faces held a new flicker of hope. I was no longer a resident of a shelter. I was the founder of one. I had taken the ugliest chapter of my life and turned it into a new beginning for dozens of other women. My stepson threw me out onto the street, and my comeback was to build a better street for everyone else. I never sought out news of Marcus again. His story was over. Mine, I realized, was just starting. I had found my true home. It wasn't a house made of bricks and mortar. It was a purpose, built on a foundation of compassion, justice, and the quiet, unshakable strength of a woman who had been to hell and had come back. Not with vengeance in her heart, but with a blueprint for a better world. 2 years passed. 2 years of hard work, long days, and a profound, quiet satisfaction I had never known before. Thea's house became my life, my purpose, my true home. It wasn't just a shelter, it was a sanctuary, a place of second chances. We helped dozens of women get back on their feet, providing them with not just a bed, but with legal aid, job counseling, and a community of support. I saw women who arrived broken, just as I had been, slowly find their strength, their voices, their futures. The revenge I had exacted on Marcus had, through the strange alchemy of fate, been transformed into a force for good. The pain of my past had become the foundation for other women's futures. I was, for the first time in my life, truly at peace. I rarely thought of Marcus. He was a ghost from a past life, a cautionary tale I sometimes shared, anonymously, with the women at the shelter. He was a symbol of the kind of casual cruelty that could shatter a life. I had heard nothing of him since he'd been evicted, and I had no desire to. His story was over. Mine was about building, not destroying. And then one cold, rainy Tuesday, the past walked right through the front doors of my new life. I was in my small office at Thea's house, going over the weekly budget, when one of my staff members, a kind social worker named Maria, knocked on my door. "Thea," she said, her expression troubled, "we have a new intake, a man. He's in a bad way, says he has nowhere else to go. The men's shelters are full tonight because of the cold." "Of course," I said without looking up. "Find him a warm bed and a hot meal. What's his name?" "Marcus," she said. "Marcus Dubois." My pen stopped moving. The room went silent, the only sound the drumming of the rain against the window pane. It couldn't be. It was an impossible, cruel coincidence. I looked up at Maria, my face a calm, practiced mask, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I'll be right out," I said. I walked into the common room, and there he was. My stepson, the arrogant, sneering man who had thrown me out of my own home, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a thin, gaunt man in ragged clothes, his face unshaven, his eyes hollowed out with a despair that was terrifyingly familiar. He was huddled in a corner, clutching a cup of hot soup, shivering. He didn't see me. He was just another lost soul, another piece of human wreckage washed up on the shores of my sanctuary. I stood there for a long moment, hidden in the doorway, a storm of emotions warring within me: anger, pity, a cold, bitter taste of victory that felt more like ash in my mouth. My guiding title had been, "I'm coming back and he'll be the one on the street." I had never imagined how literally that would come true. He was here, on the street, and now in my house, the house built with the money from the home he had stolen from me. The irony was so thick, so absolute, it was almost biblical. What do you do? What do you do when your enemy appears on your doorstep, not as a conqueror, but as a beggar? He looked up then, his gaze sweeping across the room, and his eyes met mine. The recognition was instant, and the look on his face, it was not just shock. It was a kind of primal, soul-deep horror, as if he were seeing a ghost. His face, already pale, turned a pasty, sickly white. The soup cup slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering to the floor. He scrambled to his feet. "Thea?" he whispered, his voice a choked, disbelieving croak. "What? What are you doing here?" I walked slowly towards him, my steps steady, my gaze unwavering. The other women in the room watched us, their conversations dying down, sensing the sudden, thick tension in the air. "I live here, Marcus," I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the silent room. "Or rather, I work here. I built this place." He just stared at me, his mind clearly unable to process the impossible reality before him. You built this?" "You did, actually," I said, a cold, hard smile touching my lips. "With your inheritance, or rather with mine. This is what became of your father's house, my house. It's a shelter now for women who have been cast out by men like you." He stumbled back, hitting the wall, his face a mask of utter, complete devastation. He finally understood. The full, crushing weight of his actions, the perfect, poetic justice of his fate, hit him all at once. His attempt to make me homeless had resulted in him becoming homeless, seeking shelter in the very sanctuary I had built from his betrayal. He didn't rage. He didn't make excuses. He just slid down the wall and sat on the floor, his head in his hands, and began to weep. Not the angry, frustrated sobs of a man who had been outmaneuvered, but the deep, ragged, soul-tearing sobs of a man who had finally, truly understood the magnitude of what he had lost. I stood over him and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The need for revenge was gone. All that was left was a vast, empty sadness. He was a pathetic, broken creature, a ghost haunting the ruins of his own life. I turned to Maria. "Find him a bed for the night," I said, my voice calm, professional. "Give him a meal, and tomorrow morning give him the number for the county's job placement program and the address of the men's shelter on the other side of town. He can stay here for one night just like any other person in need, but then he has to go. Thea's house is for women. It is not for him." I turned and walked back to my office, leaving him there, weeping on the floor of the home he had inadvertently built for me. My revenge was complete, and it was a far more terrible and far more just than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, Marcus was gone. He left before the sun came up, a silent ghost slipping out before any of the other women were awake. He didn't leave a note. He didn't try to speak to me again. He simply took the bus token and the list of resources my staff had given him and vanished back into the city that had swallowed him whole. I watched his departure from my office window, a solitary figure trudging through the cold morning mist, and I felt nothing. The anger, the hate, the burning need for revenge, it was all gone. All that was left was a vast, quiet, and profound sense of peace. The circle was closed. My revenge was complete, but it was not what I had expected. It was not a fiery, triumphant victory, but a quiet, somber act of justice that had come about through the universe's own strange, ironic sense of humor. I had set out to put him on the street and he had ended up there, but his arrival on my doorstep had not reignited the war. It had extinguished the last of its embers. Seeing him so thoroughly broken, so completely defeated by his own actions, had not brought me joy. It had brought me closure. He was no longer a monster haunting my thoughts. He was just a sad, pathetic man, a ghost of a boy I once loved, and his fate was no longer my concern. My concern, my entire focus was now Thea's house. My work at the shelter became my life's great third act. It was the most challenging and most rewarding work I had ever done. I poured all my energy, my life experience, and the resources from my husband's legacy into making it a true sanctuary. We expanded our services, offering not just beds, but legal workshops, therapy groups, job training programs. I learned the stories of dozens of women, each one a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I saw women arrive broken, just as I had been, and I had the profound privilege of watching them find their footing, reclaim their dignity, and walk back out into the world stronger. My life was full. I had a new family, a family of choice, made up of the incredible staff and the brave women of Thea's house. My days were long, filled with budgets and board meetings, with grant writing and counseling sessions. My evenings were quiet. I bought a small, beautiful apartment near the shelter, a place that was truly mine. It was filled with books and music and the quiet satisfaction of a day spent doing meaningful work. I had come to understand that my husband, David Sr., had given me more than just a clever clause in his will. He had given me a second chance. He knew his son's weakness, and he knew my strength. His final act of love was not just to protect me, but to free me from a life of thankless caretaking, free me to become the woman I was always meant to be. 1 year after Marcus had appeared on my doorstep, we had a small celebration at Thea's house. It was the anniversary of our opening. The common room was filled with current and former residents, with volunteers, with community leaders. There was laughter, music, and the smell of a wonderful meal we had all cooked together. I stood in the back of the room just watching. I saw a young mother we had helped escape an abusive husband, now laughing as her toddler took his first wobbly steps. I saw a woman my age who had been cheated out of her pension by her own children, now confidently leading a workshop on financial literacy for the other residents. I saw a community of survivors, a tapestry of broken lives being rewoven into something strong and beautiful. My husband had left me a house and I had lost it, but in its place I had built a home for so many. As I stood there, my heart full, I thought of my stepson one last time. I didn't know where he was, and I no longer needed to. I hoped he had found some way to battle his demons, some path to his own kind of peace. But his journey was no longer mine. My revenge was never about destroying him. The ultimate revenge, I now understood, was my own happiness. It was my own survival. It was the fact that his act of ultimate cruelty had been the catalyst for my own greatest work. He had tried to erase me, to leave me with nothing. Instead, he had given me everything. My name is Thea, and this is my house, and in it I am finally, truly at peace.